Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. Sinned? Or just failed? I don't know which is worse. Another day's gone by and I still have no idea where Quentin stashed Elizabeth. I went to visit him. I didn't have high hopes, but my options were running out. He was all, "Who the hell are you?" I was all, "My name's David Grange, and I'm your worst nightmare." Bit of a cheesy line, but there was method to my madness. Obviously, you can't just ask a kidnapper where he stashed his victim. My hope was that if I led him to think I already knew, he might let slip. To pull it off, I'd have to adopt a very confident front, hence my cheesy worst nightmare line. I used my real name, too. He, of all people, would hardly go to the police, and I figured he was more likely to buy the lie if it was the only one. Anyway, my name didn't mean much to him, and he seemed amused by the idea that I was his worst nightmare. He was all, "I'm sorry, what's this about?" I was all, "It's about Elizabeth Benton." He was all, "She's not here." I was all, "I know, and I know where she is, too." I watched his eyes as I said that, for any sign of panic, but he managed to hide the surprise he must have felt. He was all, "If you know where she is, why don't you go and bother her instead?" I was all, "Do you want to know what else I know?" He was all, "Not particularly." I was all, "I'll tell you anyway." This was tricky. I had to give enough information that he'd take me seriously, but if I went into too much detail, it'd stick out like a sore thumb when I tried to make out I knew where he'd stashed her. So it was a balancing act, and actually when I performed quite badly. I went into far more detail than necessary, jeopardizing the plan, and I'm ashamed to say I did it mostly because I wanted to show off how much I knew. I was all, "I know that her granddad wrote the jingle that inspired one of the most lucrative pop songs of the 20th century, and that until recently your company unknowingly held the rights. I know you feel they're rightfully yours, and you're only keeping Elizabeth alive until her arm heals, so you can make her sign a will that gives them to you. And I know that once it's been signed, you'll arrange matters so it comes into play rather quickly." How's that for starters? He was all, "You'd better come in." He took me through to the living room. I was all, "Aren't you going to deny it?" He was all, "Is there much point? You seem to know the full story." Can you blame me? I've had a shit life. My dad always expected me to take over Finnemore Carter Industries. Well, I'm no businessman, but you want to please your parents, don't you? I just didn't expect to be handed the reins so young. But then my dad probably didn't expect his brakes to fail when he was approaching that railway intersection. Anyway, I've done my best, but to be honest, I've run the business into the ground. What I'm good at, I found, is faking it. Most of the plebs in my employ think things are going okay. But I can only keep up the pretense for so long, and then I'm in deep shit. So if I can secure the rights to yesterday, who'd turn down a chance like that? I was all, "That's all very well, but in the meantime, couldn't you have put her somewhere less disgusting? Why there of all places?" I figured it was safe to assume he hadn't exactly put her up at the Ritz. My trap worked. He shrugged and said, "Where more convenient than my own basement?" And he nodded towards a door under the stairs. I was all, "But I watched you put her in the boot and drive off." He was all, "Someone had tipped her off. You, I presume." I knew there was a good chance they were watching the house. I was all, "So that was all a charade for my benefit. You drove to the old Finnemore Carter place, didn't you?" He looked surprised that I'd worked it out. I told him my trick with the odometer. Then I was all, "If Elizabeth's in the basement, I want to see her." He was all, "I'm not stopping you." I opened the little door and descended. It took me a few seconds to find the light switch, and as soon as I turned it on, it was obvious Elizabeth wasn't there. There was clutter piled around the walls, but otherwise the basement was empty. Then I heard the door shut behind me. I turned to see Quentin coming down the stairs. He unhooked a cordless chainsaw from the wall and switched it on. I wish people would stop trying to kill me. I was what are you going to do, decapitate me? I had to shout over the noise of the motor. He was all, only if you stay still. Otherwise, who knows how you might get mutilated. I said, so Elizabeth really is at the old Finnemore Carter place, then? I was trying the old trick of getting the supervillain to tell you his plan when he's got you cornered, so that A, you buy yourself some time, and B, you find out his plan. But he just laughed and said, "Goodbye, David Grange." I looked around for something I could use to defend myself. There was a lot of old crap, bits of furniture and stuff, but I thought building a barricade was probably too ambitious. I climbed onto a table. I figured that gave me a slight advantage. He couldn't climb up while wielding a live chainsaw, and if he came close at ground level, I could kick him in the face. Worst case scenario, he might chop off a foot. Rather that than my head. It looked like that was exactly what he intended to do. Well, I might rather lose a foot than a head, but it'd leave me fairly helpless, and he'd have no trouble finishing me off. Suddenly my idea of kicking him in the head didn't seem so smart either. When one leg's kicking, the other one's vulnerable. I could have jumped or run, except that meant coordinating my feet, and they were busy trying to avoid Quentin's blade. I managed to dodge his first couple of swipes, but it was mostly luck, and I've had more than my share of that. But then I had just a little bit more, because he drew back to have another go, and I paused in the little dance I'd been performing, and it happened that my position was just right, and my weight on the right foot, to give me the chance I needed to kick him in the head. It was a rubbish kick, but when you're holding a chainsaw, you don't take the chance that someone will knock you off balance and you'll accidentally slice off your own ear. So he stepped away, and then he had to step back and start swinging again. And all that bought me maybe 3 or 4 seconds. And that was all I needed, because from up here on my table I could reach the wheelbarrow hanging on the wall. And I swung it round and let go. Wheelbarrows are heavy, especially when they land on your head. Quentin dropped his chainsaw and collapsed. He was okay, I think. I didn't hang around to find out. But for a second I was worried I'd killed him. I can't afford to have him die while he's the only one who knows where Elizabeth is. I doubt being left to rot would be much more pleasant than whatever he's got planned for her. But where is Elizabeth? When I said he'd been to the old Finnemore Carter place, he seemed genuinely surprised that I knew. But how can she be there when... Oh, that's it, isn't it? It must be. I should have known. Well, I did know. I read all about it when I was looking for properties the company owns. The reason Finnemore Carter moved to Dover in the first place. They'd been hired to build the British drill for a Channel Tunnel attempt in the 70s. And they came here so they could build it in situ, since it would be all but immovable once complete. Obviously the project didn't get very far, but they had started tunnelling when it was axed. Well, you see what this means, Father. Somewhere near those offices is the start of the aborted tunnel. And that's where I'll find Elizabeth.